A few months ago, I covered tech billionaire Peter Thiel, founder of Palantir Technologies, a massive data company, and how he is secretly warning about the coming of the Antichrist behind closed doors in secret meetings where no one is allowed to hear what he says. But today, we have leaked recordings of what is said inside those meetings, and it sounds less like a warning and more like a blueprint, a psychological tactic to convince Christian tech leaders that if they do not continue the path that they're on, then the Antichrist will come. This is deception at the highest level, my friends. For what he is saying will keep him, the Antichrist, from coming is exactly what will make him come. So I encourage you to stick with me till the end of this video because this is unfolding in real time and I intend to cover it as far as it goes. So hit that like button. Help me reach more people with this and let's continue this journey together.
All right, let's go ahead and
Up next, the Antichrist.
Up next, the Antichrist. Let me let you set this one up. I mean, I'll give you the bare bones. Let's put this up on the screen from the Washington Post. So Peter Thiel, we all know and love, he gave this series of 4 private lectures, like 2 hours each. You had to agree that they were off the record and not to record, blah, blah, blah. Well, they got leaked. The audio got leaked to the Washington Post, so they wrote up this piece. They say, inside billionaire Peter Thiel's private lectures, warnings of the Antichrist and U.S. destruction. Tech billionaire, they write, Peter Thiel recently warned that Swedish activist Greta Thunberg and critics of technology, or AI, are, quote, legionnaires of the Antichrist. In private lectures on Christianity that connected government oversight of Silicon Valley to an apocalyptic future. In the 4 roughly 2-hour lectures, which began last month, Thiel laid out his religious views to a sold-out audience told to keep the contents off the record, according to an event listing. He argued those who propose limits on technology development not only hinder business, but also threaten to usher in the destruction of the U.S. in an era of global totalitarian rule, according to the recordings. Now, for a guy who, helped found Palantir and is invested in this whole world, very convenient that he sees any sort of infringements on technological development as helping to usher in the Antichrist.
Now think about that. He's the one that is building the systems that are necessary for absolute global surveillance. And he's saying that if you go against him, that will bring in the coming of the Antichrist. But what he's building is the exact kind of power that the Antichrist will use in this one world government. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 7 and 8, it talks about how the Antichrist was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. So he warns about this danger while he's selling the system. That's not contradiction, my friends. That's called strategy.
And there's also, there's a lot that's really noteworthy about this too. The fact that he, it's explicitly religious and Christian in a Silicon Valley setting where that hasn't always been the association. I know from listening to some of the other things that he's said publicly, you sent me some of the lectures that he'd given or the talks that he'd given previously, that he also likes to connect it to, okay, well, even if you're not religious, there's a secular concern about the end of the world. You can think about nuclear weapons. You could think about climate crisis. You could think about AI. But he believes that while AI development is dangerous, that the risks of not developing AI are more dangerous and will lead you potentially down the path as legionnaires of the Antichrist to an era of global totalitarian rule. So a very convenient set of beliefs for him to hold.
Right. So Peter Thiel has started over the last year framing this in explicitly biblical Christian theological terms by focusing in on the catechon, which is from 2 Thessalonians. I'll get into that a little bit more. Yeah. We can put F1 up on the screen. This is the Washington Post article on a sort of leaks from a lecture that Thiel gave in San Francisco, but he has been doing these lectures in multiple different places. And one of the interesting parts of this Post article, there's been a Wired article on some leaks that came out. You're seeing this drip into the media in recent months. He did this long interview with Ross Douthat. We're going to get into that as well. In fact, we actually already covered this too, because as you said at the top of the show, Crystal, anytime someone with the power that Peter Thiel has starts talking like this, you have to pay attention. So he's saying the same thing over and over again. Every time you see a new article or a new interview, he is making the same pitch over and over again. And he's doing it as there's this kind of Christian revival happening in Silicon Valley, like a real the vibe shift that's happening nationally, there's a real, not even an undercurrent anymore of that happening in Silicon Valley.
Amen.
You see it in people like Nicole Shanahan. You see it in an organization that Thiel is involved with that's bringing in a lot of powerful people in Silicon Valley. And you hear it a lot in the conversation about generative AI, large language models, and that sort of thing.
So I don't know if you heard that, but it sounds like a Christian revival is actually going on in Silicon Valley, in the tech industry. In fact, I believe that we are in a great revival right now that is more like salt. It's kind of seeping through culture, really in not a very a way that everyone can notice. It's almost like it's just seeping into people's hearts and minds, the truth of the gospel of Jesus. And so it seems to me, my theory is that he's going around and telling people using Christian language because, they're becoming Christians, that if you don't do what I say, then this Antichrist that your faith talks about is going to come. So do what I say, and he won't come. And she talked about the catechon, the restrainer in Thessalonians. And it was actually 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 6 through 7, if you want to check it out, about there's a restrainer that's keeping the Antichrist or keeping the lawless one from being revealed. But in these last days, that restrainer is going to be removed, and then he's going to come. And so that's deception, man. He thinks that he can restrain this evil by bringing the power and technology in that will make him come. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4 says, the man of lawlessness exalts himself above every so-called God. And so this is exactly almost prophetic, what Peter Thiel is doing in trying to make this lawless one come.
So here's a pretty representative encapsulation of the Thiel argument. We can go ahead and roll F2, and then we'll do some more breakdowns.
I think it was Ivan Illich who said that in the time before Christ, there were many forerunners to Christ. In the time after Christ, there will be many forerunners of the Antichrist. So in some sense, it's a type. So Nero was a type of the Antichrist, or maybe Napoleon was a type of the Antichrist. And it's sort of it's someone who aspires for world domination, to create, the creation of this sort of one world state. In some ways, Alexander the Great was sort of a pre-Christ prototype of the Antichrist. It's sort of very parallel to Christ. They both die at 33. Alexander conquers the world. Christ saves it. So sort of a compare and contrast. And so, but in some sense, the Antichrist as an idea is something that really comes into being in the world after Christ. And so there's there's a lot of things about it that are mysterious. In some ways, the Antichrist copies Christ. The Antichrist pretends to be greater than Christ, hyper-Christian, ultra-Christian, and then maybe only ultimately, deeply anti-Christian. You can think of it as a system, where maybe communism is a one-world system. So it can be an ideology or a system. And then of course, you can also think of it as Newman did, where it's sort of the final dictator of the one-world state, where it's still, you stress it more as a person. You can think of it as a type, a system, a person. How does a sort of world takeover actually happen? And it's kind of not a deus ex machina, but like a daemonium ex machina. It's like the Antichrist just gives these hypnotic speeches where nobody can remember a word, and then sort of just swindles people's souls out of them, and they submit to this totalitarian state or something like this. And I think if we were to speculate on how to solve that plot hole, we have an answer in the world after 1945, that people are, in 1900, early 20th century, people were not yet scared of apocalyptic weapons. They could not imagine, anything of the scale that we'd have by the second half of the 20th century. And so the Antichrist takes over by talking about Armageddon.
The Antichrist takes over by talking about Armageddon. Now,
Yeah, and he mentioned being a forerunner for the Antichrist. And like I said, I think that's maybe what Peter Thiel is doing right now. And when the Antichrist is going to be more like the dragon, it's like Satan, right? He's going to lie about everything he says. In fact, he's going to be just like him, because it says in the Bible that the dragon will give his authority to the Antichrist. And so whenever the Antichrist speaks, everything he says is going to be a lie. It's going to be deception. And one thing that Peter Thiel talked about that actually probably is somewhat true is the idea that the world system will match the Antichrist system. When everyone's talking about peace and security, it says, then the end will come. So when people think that everything is good, everything is fine, we finally have a type of world peace, or we have a little bit of peace here and we feel safe and secure, the end will come. So, data companies and AI, they're going to promise safety through control and peace through surveillance. But again, that is exactly what the Antichrist will use against all people. And this keeps going. So stick with me because, like I said, we need to be aware of what is actually happening.
Ross Douthat, in his interview with Peter Thiel, which we covered earlier, picked up on what many of you are picking up on after hearing Peter Thiel say the Antichrist talks a lot about Armageddon while he's been on a year-long tour talking about Armageddon. Let's roll the next clip.
Wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
There are all these different scenarios. I obviously don't think that that's what I'm doing.
To put it charitably, that was a pregnant pause after Ross Douthat basically asked, are you the Antichrist? Are you seeing any of this in the mirror?
Like, well,
it's giving Antichrist.
well, and this is the thing, is like, okay, if your fear is a totalitarian one world government,
Yes.
nothing creates a possibility of that more than the technology that like a Palantir is developing. And we see this right now in our country. Like, part of the threat of the Trump administration's, fascist tactics and goals is that the technology is there now. Like, in a way that it wasn't after 9/11. There were incredible, like, owners restrictions, like assault on civil liberties. That was all there. But we did not have the level of tech that we have now to actually be able to sweep up all of our social media communications and give us all, credit scores and put us all on the, the list of, oh, you don't like Trump, so you might low-key be a terrorist. Like, that all exists now in a way it didn't before, in part because of someone like Peter Thiel.
Now, I'm not sure about that fascist comment. I don't really typically get into politics on this channel. So, but I will say that digital ID, facial recognition, AI, global surveillance, digital banking, digital IDs, all of these are mechanisms for which the Antichrist will use to control the world. And people like Peter Thiel are saying, we got to keep moving in this direction because that'll keep us safe. It's like a tech billionaire who has all this technology. I mean, they say that any sufficient technology can be indistinguishable from magic or sorcery. And Matthew 24:24 warns of false Christ and false prophets that will arise and perform great signs and wonders as to lead even the elect astray. And so, you may not think of technology as being a sign, but goodness gracious, could you imagine describing the internet and AI or just even electricity to someone that lived even 500 years ago, much less 2,000 years ago when the Bible was written? Now, these are signs, my friends, and they're being brought by these new priests and prophets of technology, and they're making it happen. And the only way the Antichrist can make it to where no one can buy, sell, or trade, to where you're cut off from the system, is through the technology that he's building. Let's keep going.
So that's one part of it that is just like glaringly obvious. And then the part that I mentioned before about how incredibly convenient it is that you would see the people who oppose any sort of restrictions on unfettered AI development as, a true like threat to the world and legionnaires of the Antichrist in his language. So that's one piece of it. And then just to flesh out, to lay on a little bit more of what his argument is, because he says, okay, yeah, there's dangers of AI development, but the danger of not doing it is even more so. He believes we're in this period of stagnation, and that if people aren't able to, if there isn't enough growth and people aren't able to, satisfy their own, material needs, then you're going to have, greater peril and greater dangers. And there's a part of that that's true. And I certainly think that, growth is important, et cetera. I'm not a degrowther here, but he completely ignores the distribution of wealth, which AI is only set to further consolidate all of that growth in the hands of an already wealthy elite. And there's a
Yep.
complete, blind spot, as is true, I would say, of a lot of libertarians, which is what he is. There's a complete blind spot around how that wealth is distributed and the fact that the technologies you're pushing are going to make us even more wildly unequal and deny people. I mean, the goal of this tech is to make it so that human labor is basically irrelevant so that people don't have jobs. Like, how do you think that is going to go for
Right.
society? What sort of peril do you think that creates for society?
This is the big question. I mean, a lot of the libertarians who accuse everyone else of being degrowthers say that what we need is a democratized AI marketplace where you can have small AI and big AI, big tech getting challenges from small tech. But that's not at all what's poised to happen. What it looks like, and this is, we break down some of the theological stuff coming out here because a lot of the coverage refers to Peter Thiel as like a devout Christian or dedicated Christian or something like that. And he's very eccentric. I mean, he may be devout in his own way as he does think very deeply and often about Christianity, and he does apply a Christian framework, but his Christian framework is not orthodox, lowercase o, orthodox Christianity at all.
I would love to find out if he actually is a Christian, because it's easy to claim you're one, but not bow your knee and your heart and your life to Jesus Christ. Do you believe that Jesus Christ came in the flesh? Do you believe that he died on the cross and rose from the grave? Do you believe that he's coming back to judge the living and the dead and bring about, the absolute freedom and joy of being free from death and free from all sickness? He's coming back. And I'd love to know what Peter Thiel thinks about Jesus, and not just say you're a Christian or you believe in the Christian faith. Okay, a lot of people can say they're Christian, but not actually be one. So the Antichrist system, I don't believe is going to come from pure evil alone, but through people that are thinking they're saving the world because of destruction, maybe the economic turmoil, maybe another disease, maybe some great war, something that happens. The Antichrist will come and make it seem like he's coming to save the world. But like I said, and the reason I'm making this video and following this is the technology that the Antichrist would need to save the world is in the hands of these tech billionaires, the ones that are warning against his coming. So this is prophecy unfolding in real time, my friends. All this stuff that's happening with global governance, global surveillance, digital IDs, everything that the WEF is pushing. But understand the Creator's plans cannot be thwarted. While the world builds systems of control, Jesus Christ is building his kingdom. And I believe that's why we're together. So keep speaking the truth. Keep bringing up Jesus in love, in conversations. Help people to realize that what is happening right now in real time has been written 2,000 years ago. We are in prophecy. So know his word, stay awake, and let's keep connected. Hit that like button. Let's continue to push this out there to more people and subscribe to this channel so we can continue this journey together. I thank you for being here, my friends. Let me know what you think in the comments. Truth be told.